My family gave my sister everything and left me behind, so I rose alone and taught them what favoritism really costs in the end. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and for as long as I can remember, my family has always revolved around my younger sister, who is 24. She's the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. From the moment we were kids, it was clear she was their favorite. She excelled at everything: academics, sports, social life, you name it. My parents made sure everyone knew. Every parent-teacher conference, every holiday, every family gathering was all about her. Meanwhile, I was just there. It wasn't like I was completely ignored, but I wasn't supported either. Growing up, I struggled a lot in school. It wasn't until I was 23 that I got diagnosed with ADHD. That diagnosis answered a lot of questions, but as a kid, all it meant was being constantly compared to my sister. Where she got A's, I barely scraped by with C's. Where she was earning soccer trophies, I was losing interest halfway through practices. Looking back, it's like I was set up to fail. She got tutors when she struggled, I got lectures about applying myself. She got extra spending money for being responsible, I got grounded for being careless with my allowance. The worst part was the emotional distance. My parents didn't just favor her, they seemed outright disappointed in me. By the time I turned 18, I couldn't take it anymore. I moved out the second I could. I wasn't angry, not really. I think I just accepted my place in the family. I kept the relationship minimal: birthday texts, holiday calls, the occasional visit. But every time I went home, it was the same story. They'd talk about her new internship, her promotions, her latest achievements. When it came to me, there was silence. It was like I didn't exist unless they were asking about her. While she thrived, I struggled to find my footing. College was rough, and I barely graduated. But one thing stuck: I'd always been fascinated with technology. I got into coding, mostly self-taught, and found myself drawn to creating tools that helped make life easier. I didn't have a grand plan at first, but I knew I wanted to work on something that mattered. That's when the idea for my startup came. It started as a side project, a simple app designed to help people like me, who struggled with focus and time management. Over time, it grew into something bigger. I poured every penny I had into it, working nights and weekends. It wasn't easy, there were plenty of setbacks. I reached out to my family once, just looking for some moral support or advice. That was a mistake. My mom told me I should focus on finding a real job. My dad suggested I talk to my sister, who was running a small marketing company at the time, to see if she could take me on. It wasn't even about the money. I just wanted someone to say they believed in me. Instead, I got a lecture about stability and responsibility. That conversation lit a fire under me. If they didn't believe I could do it, I'd prove them wrong. I sacrificed everything: time, relationships, sleep, to make it work. After years of hustling, it finally paid off. The app started gaining traction, investors took notice, and one day, I landed a deal that changed everything. Suddenly, I wasn't scraping by anymore. My startup wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. We got media coverage, awards, and a lot of attention. I remember seeing the first article about us and feeling this rush of pride. For once, I wasn't just her brother. I was something on my own. That's when my family came back into the picture. My parents, who hadn't called me in months, suddenly wanted to catch up. They were posting my success stories on Facebook, tagging me in old photos, and talking about how proud they were. My sister, who hadn't shown much interest in what I was doing before, started reaching out too. It felt weird. For years, I was invisible to them, and now they couldn't stop calling. They'd bring up how they always knew I'd make it or how they knew I had potential. But I couldn't forget how dismissive they'd been when I needed them most. I kept things civil but distant. I wasn't sure how to handle it. Part of me wanted to let it go, to just enjoy the newfound attention and validation, but another part of me couldn't shake the resentment. They didn't care when I was struggling, they only cared now that I was successful. Eventually, I turned to Reddit. I didn't know where else to go. I laid it all out: the favoritism, the neglect, the sudden interest now that I had made it. I wasn't looking for validation, I just wanted to hear from someone who'd been through something similar. The responses were overwhelming. People shared their own stories, their own struggles with family dynamics and success. It was comforting to know I wasn't alone, but it also made me realize something: I didn't owe them anything. The media coverage of my startup had barely gone live before my phone started blowing up. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly remembered I existed. My inbox was flooded with congratulatory messages, awkward check-ins, and a surprising number of "hey, we should catch up" texts. At first, I was overwhelmed. Some messages were genuinely nice, but most of them felt off, like they were less about celebrating my success and more about what they could get out of it. The first call that caught me off guard was from my sister. We hadn't talked much since I moved out except for the occasional family event where she'd tell me how busy she was with her business. This time, she started with a warm, almost overly enthusiastic tone. She wanted to catch up and hear about my app. It didn't take long for the conversation to shift, though. She asked if I'd considered collaborating with her company. She hinted at how a partnership could help both of us grow, but the subtext was clear. She wanted in. A day later, I noticed my parents had posted about me on Facebook. They were sharing links to articles about the startup, captioned with things like, "So proud of our son. We always knew he'd do great things." It felt bizarre. These were the same people who once brushed off my work as a hobby. Now they were acting like my biggest cheerleaders. The strangest part came when they invited me to dinner. This was out of character. We hadn't had a proper family dinner in years. Still, I went, partly out of curiosity and partly because I figured it was better to face whatever was happening head on. The dinner started awkwardly. My mom had gone all out, cooking my favorite childhood meals. They acted warm, attentive, and overly interested in my life, something I wasn't used to. But as the evening went on, the conversation inevitably turned to my financial situation. My dad casually mentioned how much my success must have changed things for me and hinted that I could give back to the family. My mom chimed in, talking about how a small loan could help them with a few house updates they'd been putting off. I tried to keep it polite but firm, explaining that every penny was going back into the business for now. They nodded, but the air grew noticeably colder. Then came the gaslighting. My mom said things like, "You know we always believed in you," and my dad added, "We knew you had it in you from the start." It was like they'd erased the years of dismissiveness and replaced them with a fantasy where they'd been supportive all along. I couldn't let it slide. I reminded them of the times I'd reached out for help or advice, only to be brushed off. I even mentioned some of their exact words, like when my mom had suggested I get a real job. That shut down the conversation fast. My dad changed the subject, and my mom just stared at her plate. A few days later, my sister sent a long, angry text. She called me stingy and accused me of not valuing family. She brought up how she'd helped me in the past, though the only help I could remember was her suggesting I apply for an entry-level position at her company when I first started my startup. Her message ended with something about how family was supposed to come first. That was the final straw for me. I realized I couldn't navigate this alone, so I booked my first therapy session. The therapist helped me unpack a lot, my resentment, my guilt, and my need to set firmer boundaries. It was a relief to have someone help me make sense of it all. Meanwhile, my business kept growing. We landed another major deal, which brought in more investors and solidified our position in the industry. But with that success came more family drama. My parents came up with the idea of starting a family fund. They suggested we all contribute to it and share the benefits. It was framed as a way to strengthen our bond, but it felt more like a ploy to access my money. I refused outright. That decision didn't go over well. My parents started spreading their version of events to extended family, painting me as selfish and ungrateful. Aunts, uncles, and cousins began calling, some to scold me, others to guilt-trip me into reconsidering. One even said, "You're successful because of how your parents raised you. The least you can do is give back." I didn't bother defending myself to them. Instead, I doubled down on my decision to focus on my chosen family, my friends, colleagues, and the people who genuinely supported me. It wasn't easy, but every day, I felt a little more confident that I was doing the right thing. By the end of that week, I decided one thing. I wasn't going to let my family rewrite history, and I wasn't going to let them guilt me into giving up what I'd worked so hard to build. Not long after the whole family fund fiasco, things took an even stranger turn. My parents and sister started crafting a completely different version of events, one where they'd been my biggest supporters all along. It began with subtle changes, posts on Facebook about raising 2 successful kids and old photos of me with captions like, "We always knew he'd do great things." It didn't stop there, though. They started tagging me in these posts, adding little anecdotes about how they had encouraged me to follow my dreams and supported me when times were tough. It was surreal to read, especially knowing how dismissive they'd been during my startup's early days. They acted like they were part of the journey when, in reality, they'd been completely absent. The worst was when they posted a throwback photo of my high school graduation. They weren't even there that day. They skipped it to attend one of my sister's soccer tournaments, something they had justified by saying she had a real shot at a scholarship. Seeing that photo with a caption about how proud they'd been of me made my stomach turn. I shared this on Reddit, detailing the photo and what actually happened. The response was overwhelming. People couldn't believe the audacity of my family. Some even shared their own stories of relatives rewriting history for clout, which helped me feel less alone. That's when I realized just how much of this behavior was about their need to seem relevant in my success. While all this was happening, my therapist helped me unpack a lot. She pointed out that their behavior wasn't about me at all. It was about them trying to regain control of the narrative now that I didn't need them anymore. That insight didn't make their actions okay, but it helped me see the bigger picture. Still, the constant drama was wearing me down. I started to seriously consider going no contact, but the idea of cutting them off completely felt overwhelming. The guilt lingered, even though I knew it was what I needed. In the middle of this mess, my company hit another major milestone. We won an award for innovation and accessibility tech, which brought a new wave of attention to both me and the business. It should have been a moment of celebration, but it only added fuel to the fire. One day, I was in the office when my assistant rushed in, looking flustered. She whispered that two people claiming to be my parents were in the lobby, demanding to see me. I was stunned. They hadn't told me they were coming, and I definitely hadn't invited them. When I went out to the lobby, they were waiting there, looking completely out of place among the sleek decor and professional atmosphere. My dad was gesturing wildly, trying to convince the receptionist to let them in, while my mom stood there with a forced smile. My team was watching from behind their desks, clearly uncomfortable. I walked up to them and calmly asked why they were there. They launched into a spiel about how they just wanted to congratulate me in person for the award. It was clear they wanted to make a scene, and I wasn't going to let that happen. I thanked them for stopping by but told them they couldn't just show up unannounced. When they tried to argue, I firmly asked them to leave. The whole thing was embarrassing, but it reinforced something for me. I needed stricter boundaries. Things escalated further when I found out my sister had launched her own app. It was eerily similar to mine, down to some of the features we'd spent years refining. She was marketing it as her passion project, but it was clear she was trying to piggyback off my success. I immediately got my lawyers involved. They reviewed everything and advised me to take legal action if necessary. It was a tough call. On one hand, I didn't want to escalate things further. On the other, I couldn't let her undermine everything I'd worked for. The stress from all of this took a toll on me. I started having trouble sleeping and found it harder to focus at work. My therapist suggested taking a short break, so I stepped back from day-to-day operations for a couple of weeks. It helped, but the drama wasn't over. I posted about the office incident on Reddit, and the story blew up. Thousands of people shared their own experiences with family members showing up unannounced, trying to stake a claim in their lives. It went so viral that my family started getting backlash from people who recognized the story. They were furious and blamed me for airing our dirty laundry. That's when I decided I couldn't leave anything to chance. From that point on, I started documenting every interaction with them, every call, every text, every visit. I kept a record of it all. I didn't know what might happen next, but I wanted to be prepared for anything. By the end of it, I realized I couldn't keep playing their game. It was time to take control of my life, even if it meant making some hard choices. Things were starting to settle down, or so I thought. My boundaries were holding strong, and my family had gone quiet after the fallout from their surprise office visit. Then I got a message from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. She started with small talk, but it quickly became clear she had something important to share. She told me that my grandfather, who passed away when I was a teenager, had left behind a significant inheritance. I vaguely remembered hearing something about it back then, but I never thought much of it. According to her, the inheritance was supposed to be split equally between me and my sister, except that's not what happened. My cousin explained that my parents had quietly funneled the majority of the money into my sister's education and career, leaving almost nothing for me. She wasn't just going off rumors, she had proof. Old bank statements showing withdrawals from accounts linked to the inheritance, all directed toward expenses like my sister's private school tuition, sports camps, and even a down payment on her first apartment. I was floored. Growing up, my parents had always made it clear that money was tight. When I asked for help with school or extracurriculars, they'd say they couldn't afford it. Meanwhile, my sister was getting top-tier everything, no questions asked. Now I knew why. I immediately reached out to my lawyer. I wanted to know if there was any way to hold them accountable. After reviewing the documents my cousin provided, he confirmed that I had a strong case. The inheritance was legally supposed to be divided equally, and my parents had clearly violated those terms. Before taking any legal action, I decided to confront them directly. I called and asked if we could meet. They sounded hesitant but agreed. We met at their house, and I brought copies of the bank statements with me. When I showed them the evidence, their reactions were predictable. At first, They denied everything, accusing my cousin of lying and claiming I was just trying to stir up trouble. But as I laid out more proof, withdrawal dates, amounts, and matching expenses, they couldn't keep up the act. Eventually, they admitted to using the money for my sister's benefit. Their justification? She had so much potential, and they didn't think I'd need it as much. They actually said they assumed I wouldn't amount to much anyway. Hearing that was like a punch to the gut. My sister, who had apparently been listening in from the other room, came out to join the conversation. She didn't apologize or even seem surprised. Instead, she doubled down, saying she deserved the money because she'd worked harder and was more successful at the time. She even accused me of being ungrateful for everything my parents had done for me. That was the breaking point. I left without saying much and went straight home. Later that night, I posted about the situation on Reddit, keeping it anonymous but including enough details for people to understand. The post exploded. Thousands of people weighed in, with most urging me to take legal action. Some shared similar stories of inheritance drama, which helped me feel less alone. After a lot of thought, I decided to move forward with the lawsuit. My lawyer filed the paperwork, and the fallout was immediate. My parents and sister went into full damage control mode, spinning the story to make me look like the villain. They told extended family members that I was suing them out of greed, conveniently leaving out the part where they'd stolen my inheritance. The calls and messages from relatives started pouring in. Some demanded to know why I was tearing the family apart, while others tried to guilt-trip me into dropping the case. One aunt even suggested I was being ungrateful, saying, "Your parents did the best they could. Why can't you just let it go?" I ignored all of it. Instead, I focused on the overwhelming support I was getting from strangers online and from the people in my life who truly cared about me. My friends were incredible, stepping up to remind me that I wasn't in the wrong. My therapist also played a huge role, helping me manage the emotional toll of the lawsuit. But it wasn't easy. There were days when I questioned whether it was worth it. The stress of the legal process, combined with the constant attacks from my family, made it hard to focus on anything else. Still, I knew I couldn't let them get away with what they'd done. In the meantime, my sister's app, which was suspiciously similar to mine, had completely flopped. Her launch had been rushed and poorly planned, and she'd lost a significant amount of money trying to compete with me. I couldn't help but wonder if that played a role in their renewed hostility. As the lawsuit progressed, I started documenting everything, every interaction, every message, every call. I kept meticulous records to protect myself. I wasn't going to leave anything to chance. By the end of it all, I realized this wasn't just about the money. It was about standing up for myself and finally breaking free from the toxic dynamics that had defined my relationship with my family for so long. The fallout from the lawsuit turned my family dynamic into a full-blown circus. My parents and sister began bombarding me with calls and texts at all hours. Some messages were dripping with guilt-tripping, full of lines like, "How could you do this to your own family?" Others were outright hostile, accusing me of being greedy and vindictive. It didn't stop there. My parents began threatening to countersue for defamation, claiming I was damaging their reputation. It was laughable, considering the mountain of evidence I had to back up my case. My lawyer wasn't concerned, but the threat still added an extra layer of stress to an already overwhelming situation. The real kicker came when my sister took things public. She went on a rant across her social media platforms, painting me as the villain. She claimed I was trying to ruin the family, that I was obsessed with money, and even threw in some fake stories about how much my parents had sacrificed for me. Her posts were riddled with inaccuracies, but they stirred up plenty of drama among mutual connections. I brought all of this to my therapist, who helped me see what was really going on. She explained that their behavior wasn't about me, it was about their insecurities. They couldn't handle losing control of the narrative and were lashing out because they felt exposed. It was a breakthrough for me. For the first time, I realized I didn't have to keep engaging with them. That week, I took the biggest step yet. I went no contact. With my lawyer's help, I drafted a formal no-contact letter and sent it to my parents and sister. It clearly outlined my boundaries and warned them not to contact me again. The silence that followed was deafening and liberating. For the first time in months, my phone wasn't lighting up with their calls and texts. There were no new social media posts targeting me, no more underhanded comments through extended family. It felt like I could finally breathe. With the drama out of the way, I had the space to focus on the people who truly mattered. My friends, who had been my rock through all of this, became even more like family to me. I spent more time with them, strengthening those relationships and realizing how lucky I was to have their support. Meanwhile, my startup hit another major milestone, earning industry recognition for its innovative work. It was a huge win, and for once, I was able to celebrate without the shadow of my family hanging over me. To my surprise, a few extended family members reached out privately. They apologized for how my parents and sister had treated me, expressing their support and even offering to testify on my behalf if needed. Their words didn't undo the hurt, but they were a small reminder that not everyone in my family shared the same toxic mindset. One evening, I sat down with a notebook and began writing everything I'd been holding in for years: memories of feeling invisible as a kid, the constant comparisons to my sister, the outright neglect. All of it came pouring out. It was cathartic, like letting go of a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. As I wrote, one memory stood out. I was about 16, and it was the night of my school's annual awards ceremony. I wasn't expecting much, just a certificate for perfect attendance. My parents were supposed to come, but at the last minute, they said they couldn't make it. My sister had a soccer practice they couldn't miss. I stood on that stage alone, looking out at an audience of proud parents, feeling like the only kid who didn't matter. I shared that story on Reddit, and the response was overwhelming. People flooded the comments with their own stories, many echoing similar experiences of being overlooked or treated as an afterthought. It was heartbreaking but also incredibly validating. Inspired by the support I received, I decided to hold a small closure ceremony for myself. I gathered old family photos, mementos, and letters, and in a private moment, I burned them. It wasn't about erasing the past, it was about letting go of the hold it had on me. As I moved forward, my Reddit posts began to take on a new life. They started inspiring others to set boundaries with their own toxic families. People messaged me, thanking me for sharing my journey and telling me how it had helped them find the courage to stand up for themselves. With the drama behind me, I poured my energy into my business and personal growth. I had more time to focus on what truly mattered, and the results spoke for themselves. My company thrived, and I felt more at peace than I ever had before. A year after cutting ties with my family, life looks completely different. And for the better, my startup has grown beyond what I ever imagined. We recently expanded internationally, opening offices in Europe, and our team has more than tripled in size. We're now considered a leader in accessibility tech, and seeing the impact of our work has been one of the most rewarding parts of this journey. Amid all this professional growth, I've also found happiness in my personal life. Through a mutual friend, I met someone incredible. It started casually, grabbing coffee and chatting about shared interests, but it quickly grew into something more. They've been a grounding force, someone who genuinely supports me and understands my complicated history. For the first time, I'm in a relationship that feels healthy and supportive. Recently, I hosted a dinner for my closest friends, the people I now consider my chosen family. As we sat around the table, laughing and sharing stories, I couldn't help but reflect on how much has changed. These are the people who've stood by me through everything: the lawsuit, the family drama, the highs and lows of building my company. Looking around, I realized that I finally have the family I always wished for, even if it's not the one I was born into. Despite going no contact with my immediate family, their drama still finds its way to me through the grapevine. Extended relatives occasionally reach out, either to gossip or to guilt me into reconnecting. From what I've heard, my parents are still spinning their narrative, blaming me for the fallout and claiming I've abandoned them. At first, hearing these rumors was frustrating, but therapy has helped me truly let go of the need for their approval. One of the most meaningful changes in my life has been my decision to give back. Inspired by my own struggles growing up, I started a scholarship fund for neurodivergent students. The fund focuses on providing resources and opportunities for young people who, like me, might otherwise fall through the cracks. Seeing the first group of recipients begin their journeys has been incredible. It feels like I'm helping create the support system I always wished I had. Around this time, a journalist reached out to me, wanting to do a feature on my life and the success of my company. While it was flattering, I decided to decline. I've worked hard to separate my personal life from my professional one, and I want the focus to stay on the work we're doing, not the drama that brought me here. That decision was reinforced during a recent public event. I was there to represent my company, and everything was going smoothly until I spotted my sister in the crowd. It was an unexpected and awkward moment. She approached me, and we exchanged polite small talk, nothing heated or dramatic, but it was clear there was a lot left unsaid. A few days later, she sent me a message. She admitted that she felt guilty about how our parents treated me, but stopped short of offering a real apology. She explained that she was just doing what she thought was expected of her at the time and hoped I could understand. I read her message a couple of times before responding. I kept it brief, thanking her for reaching out, but making it clear that I'd moved on and wasn't looking to reopen old wounds. As I reflected on the interaction, I realized that closure doesn't always come in the form of an apology. or even a conversation. Sometimes, it's simply deciding for yourself that you're ready to let go. In my final Reddit post, I shared how far I've come since that first post. When I wrote it, I was overwhelmed and unsure of what to do, but the community gave me the clarity and courage to stand up for myself. Setting boundaries wasn't easy, but it was worth it. I also shared some of the lessons I've learned along the way. Resilience isn't about being unaffected by pain, it's about finding the strength to move forward in spite of it. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or reconciling, sometimes it just means forgiving yourself for holding on too long. And happiness? It doesn't come from anyone else's approval, it comes from building a life you're proud of. The response to that post was incredible. One user messaged me, saying my story inspired them to leave their own toxic family situation. We exchanged a few messages, and hearing how my journey had helped them make a change was one of the most rewarding moments of this entire process. Now I'm entering a new chapter. I've decided to step back from the day-to-day operations of my company to focus on personal projects. I want to explore new passions, spend more time with the people I care about, and continue giving back in meaningful ways.